Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and today I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. I've got some Bitcoin news to show you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the economy in general, a little bit about precious metals, and then I've got some interesting developments in the charts to show you. So without further ado, let's get into this. Look, time is running out, okay? Bitcoin is about to reset multiple cycles over the next week. In my book, in Bob's and in my book, this generally means a fairly solid multi-week rally is ahead of us in the worst case scenario. In the worst case scenario, we're likely going to have a multi-week rally for Bitcoin. So I will get to the charts at the end of this video. It's important to point out that active supply can move between price levels pretty quickly. But this is truly a massive bar. 11.5% of all Bitcoin in circulation sits at the current price levels. So what does this mean? Well, what this means is at the current price levels, 11.5% of the supply has changed hands. Usually, this means that either weak hands or retail sold their Bitcoin to strong hands and institutions. This is how the game is played. They create this massive FTX collapse. They create this massive bear market manipulation. They create this massive amount of fear, this massive amount of drawdown that scares everyone into thinking Bitcoin is dead, everyone that doesn't understand it at least. They sell their Bitcoin at the lows, and that is where the institutions, the central banks, the whales and the smart money steps in and hoovers it up at these cheap prices. This is also indicative that we have likely seen the lows for Bitcoin. It's important to keep in mind that this could be your future. Bitcoin is not just about buying Bitcoin and making more fiat currency. Bitcoin is really about freedom. It is about hope for humanity. And this could be your future thanks to CBDCs, which by the way are slavery, unlike Bitcoin, which is freedom. Here are the text messages, okay? Alert, funds not spent within the next 12 hours will be lost. Follow the links provided. Remember, with CBDCs, they can force you to spend it or your money will expire. They can also say, if you don't boost your social credit score by spending €100 before this weekend, then you're going to lose your money again. This is absolutely the real world scenario. This is absolutely what happens in places like China where they have the CBDC rollout. This is not speculation. This is how the CBDC program has been designed. You must opt out and you must do it quickly. Over in Nigeria, the government is applying even more pressure to try to force the adoption of their CBDC. Nigeria is going to ban cash withdrawals from government accounts from the 1st of March to try to tackle what they call illicit activity and push towards a cashless economy. Of course, they don't want you to have cash because they want you to adopt the CBDC. Now, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go and watch the video I did on Nigeria and the CBDCs. They are showing the world that it is indeed possible to exit the system. They have had a CBDC for over a year and they have less than 0.5% adoption. Meanwhile, they have over 35% adoption of Bitcoin. They have truly exited the system and they have taken the lead in showing the world that it can indeed be exited and you can refuse these CBDCs and you can separate money from state. Celsius Network was one of the networks which blew up last year and had to declare bankruptcy. The US court has since granted the Celsius Network ownership rights to all $4.2 billion of the customer deposits. Whether you know it or not, when you use an exchange, you sign terms and conditions, and amongst those terms and conditions, you agree that if that exchange goes bankrupt, they can use your money to bail themselves out and you get absolutely no rights. This is a perfect example of this. This is true of your bank as well, by the way. If your bank goes bankrupt, they will not give you your money back. They will take your money and they will use it to bail themselves out first. This is yet another example of why it's so important to cold store your Bitcoin and your crypto. Remember, not your keys, not your coins. Doesn't even apply to Ethereum network because that is mainly OFAC compliant, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which remember is owned by the US Treasury Department. ETH ceased to be a bearer asset when they moved to proof of stake. The world is waking up to the difference between Bitcoin and all other cryptos. The world is waking up to the importance of cold storage. Remember as well, income taxes and fiat was born of war. And it's to this very day the two things used to fund ongoing wars. Very few people understand Bitcoin is a solution to human ethics because Bitcoin is neutral money. There will not be any wars fought over Bitcoin. Bitcoin is completely neutral because it is decentralized. So with Bitcoin down 75% from its all-time high, Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki has said he is excited and buying more. And it is these sorts of people, the deep pockets, the highly informed investors, that contribute to this massive bar right here. MasterCard CEO has said that blockchain holds enormous promise despite the controversies in the crypto world. Again, I've done videos on this before. Visa and MasterCard are basically going to be forced to adopt Bitcoin or they're going to get left behind. The European Central Bank has said that self-custody Bitcoin wallets need to be regulated. Good luck with that. This is absolutely true. How can they enforce this law? They simply cannot enforce this law. And if they were to try anything like this, I'm sure the outcome would look exactly the same as Nigeria, as I've shown you, and as I've covered in my video on Nigeria. And from Nigeria to the US economy is nowhere near a recession because initial jobless claims came out at 204K. We are absolutely miles away from the minimum level for a recession to begin. Does this suggest that we could potentially see an up year in 2023, even if we have to go down a bit first? Remember, market rates set the direction and the Fed follows. The US 10-year Treasury yield has continued lower despite hawkish FOMC meeting minutes. As you can see, breakdown, retest, looking for that resumption lower. Bitcoin is poised to transition to a digital version of gold, according to Bloomberg Intelligence. And speaking of this, we are seeing places like Japan announcing unscheduled bond buying operations. Another one, just like the UK did earlier this year, we are seeing QE emerge without being called QE. It's kind of this stealth QE. Slowly but surely, nations are starting to turn the printers back on to either be the buyer of last resort and put a bid underneath their bond markets, whether it's to bail the pension funds out like the UK did, whether it is to offer support to the citizens in the form of stimulus checks or help with their energy bills. We are slowly seeing the printers come back on, even though they haven't announced a QE program. And of course, by printing money, the currencies debase, the currencies collapse. And when they reach the point of total collapse, which is of course the inevitability for all fiat currencies because that was how they were designed, you find that you see gold rushes in places like Egypt where its currency is currently collapsing. Gold is at all-time highs against the Egyptian currencies. The local gold market is now disorientated with some merchants suspending buying and selling operations until the market stabilizes. This is what happens when you have a currency crisis. Remember, it's important to opt out of this system using Bitcoin, gold, and silver whilst you still can. It's no good waiting for the currency to collapse and then try to go and buy gold because it might be suspended and most probably you won't even have any purchasing power left after the massive inflation. Full disclosure, I don't predict inflation to spike until possibly the end of 2023 or even 2024. But make no mistake about it, I fully believe it is going to come back. I put a post on Twitter yesterday. I said it might be time to lock in some profit now and wait for a new entry in silver. And I will show you the justification for this in a minute. First of all, we have a trendline break. Also, we have a dollar which looks like it could be about to put in that long-awaited counter-trend bounce before the next leg down. So I'll get to the charts and I'll show you what I mean. First of all, the dollar. I thought we would hit this trend line, but I have to admit, I kind of missed something quite massive here. I missed this horizontal level through lack of scrolling back. And as I scroll out, what you'll see is this is probably why we bounced at the level we did. This was resistance, and going back even further than this, you'll see that this was support and then failed support. This was resistance and then broken resistance, turned support. So this was a big level, and that's just my fault for not zooming out far enough. However, I think it's safe to say that what we're going to see now is the dollar start to put in some level of counter trend bounce as it heads up here. Now, I think it will be capped at a maximum of 108, and that's assuming it even gets there. But by extending this trend line out, we could even see as high as 109 or even 110 before the next leg down. So because of this, I had to respect the fact that this is likely going to put pressure on the precious metals. And coupled with the fact we have had a trend line break from silver, I decided to take the profit on this trade. If I was to invert this chart, hopefully you'll see what I mean. If this was to the long side, this would be breakout looking for that retest followed by a resumption. Now that does not mean that this couldn't turn out to be a shakeout that got me. But there's nothing to say until we have a few more candles that this won't morph into a big deep flush out, potentially even to undercut the stops in this level before resuming higher. So I'm more than happy to lock in the profit at this point. If this turns out to be a shakeout that got me and we come back up here and trade like this, then I will just re-enter the trade on a breakout of this box right here. But for now, I have to respect the risk. I have to respect that we have technical damage. We have a trend line break and are currently flipping this support into resistance. So again, it doesn't mean we couldn't recover back up. And if that's the case, then fine, I gave up a few points and we'll re-enter to the long side. But if this turns out to be what I suspect it will, which is a bigger shakeout move that happens on the dollar rallying, as I showed you here, if we get something like this before we break down and silver decides to get rejected at resistance and roll over, then why would I give back all of this massive profit here? So that is one trade managed for silver. That is profit locked in. There's another scenario that could unfold, and that's what if we get something like this and then come down again and then go? Well, of course, the answer to that is we repeat this pattern, we draw a trend line and we buy the break, and the long comes from here, just as we did down here. So So that's my silver trade. That's that one managed. Currently neutral on silver. Waiting to see how this progresses. It's Friday, so not looking to take on any more risk. I have held my gold trade because I can justify holding it. As you can see, we're still above this support line. No problem there. The miners are, again, still breaking out, still looking to resume higher. So continue to hold these. No problem there. Breakout, retest of the box, looking for resumption higher. So I still have a lot of precious metal exposure. Again, if this was to break down from here, then I have to respect the breakdown. If I invert the chart, it becomes a lot easier to see. So this is now upside down. If we do something like this, okay, you have to respect that move. Have to respect that move. Like I said, it could always turn out to be a shakeout that got me, but that's okay, because if this turns out to be a shakeout and does this, then of course we re-enter here. And if I invert the chart, you'll see what I'm talking about. Let's look at the chart of all charts, okay? The Bitcoin chart. Bitcoin, is it going to put in one of these cycle lows? It looks like it kind of wants to do it, but it hasn't done it yet. So you know the strategy, particularly if you've been on the channel before. If we can get a dive down, kind of like what this yellow line suggests or shows here, then we can go long here and target, as I showed you from Bob Lucas at the beginning of the video, at minimum of a solid multi-week rally. If, however, we just continue to kind of trade sideways and curl up, especially through Tuesday, then we get something like this, then of course the long will come from this breakout of the blue horizontal line. So that's my strategy for both outcomes that I can see occurring for Bitcoin. Still holding Geo, not really much to say about this. If it's going to be a super performing stock, then it really needs to start doing something like this and building on its way out of this box. For now, continue to hold this. I won't tolerate much loss below these lows here. Riot blockchain showing some interesting activity. Currently trying to break out. Can it retest and go? In which case, that is a long from me all day long. I've been patiently lining up this trade for many, many weeks now. If you wanted to play the safe entry, then this purple line above would be a better entry, or at least a safer entry. But obviously you'll have to tolerate a wider stop in this scenario. So there's two options there. If we can get breakout, retest, resumption, I think I'm probably going to go long here and then keep an eye on the purple trend line. But if you wanted to play it safe, you could always take the breakout of the purple line and have a wider stop like this. But very interesting action from Riot, and it's about time for me to get long, I would think. Looking at the FTSE 100, look at this. How many points are we away now? This has got to be nothing. We're 0.5%. We're 0.5% off the highs. So again, none of this to me speaks to bear market rally. This speaks more to a melt up scenario. The US equities not telling the same story, but perhaps these two are just going to completely decouple and do their own thing. That's absolutely fine. The VIX continues to kind of do nothing still, so that's fine. Again, doesn't speak to one of these big drawdowns just yet. Doesn't mean it couldn't change and couldn't change quickly, but as of right now, not speaking to a massive stock market crash. The Dow Jones still hanging around this area. Are we going to have to flip short? Are we going to have to pay a stop and flip short like I've shown on this channel over and over again? That remains to be seen, but all the while we are not stopped out, then we're in, we're long, we're strong, and we continue to push. The S&P 500, this to me, especially given the cycle count, tells me that most probably what we're about to see is like a bear flag break it down and a drop into that cycle low, and then I think it's time to get long down there. So playing patient for here. I think most probably if the S&P is going to do this, it could well take the Dow down with it. So how low it goes remains to be seen. Like I've said over and over again, you know the strategy for playing that. And lastly, I just want to talk about the US 10-year yield. Is this going to get a rejection off here? Because if that's the case, then we are likely going to see risk come on very, very strongly. This would be very, very good for precious metals markets. This would be very, very good for Bitcoin. If, however, instead of we get some kind of breakout that moves higher, this is going to pressure the metals market. This is going to pressure the Bitcoin market, and it's certainly going to put pressure on the stock market in the short term. I wonder if this is what we will see whilst the S&P finds its way down into that cycle low, and then from there, once the S&P has found its cycle low, can the US 10-year perhaps roll over once more and finally begin its way down? So that of course remains to be seen. As always, we take it one day at a time. If you found value here today, I'd appreciate it if you could drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you're not already, because we are only about 7 subscribers away from 500, so that would be a nice milestone for the channel. Make sure you turn the notifications on if you want to get notified of every single time I put out a video and every single time I modify a position, whether I get stopped out, whether I close a trade, whether I take profit, whether I open a new position. If you want to get notified of that stuff, make sure you hit the notification bell. If you have any questions or anything you want me to cover, throw it down in the comments. And until next time, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.